January 14th, 2025, 3:47 a.m., the Persian Gulf. A distress call crackles through the darkness. A vessel is sinking. 23 souls are trapped aboard a cargo ship taking on water fast. The nearest rescue assets? An American Coast Guard cutter and a US Navy destroyer. There's just one problem. The ship flying the distress signal is Iranian. For over 4 decades, the United States and Iran have been locked in one of the most bitter geopolitical rivalries on Earth. But out here, in the blackness of the Gulf, none of that matters, because the sea doesn't care about flags, it doesn't care about politics, and neither do the men and women trained to save lives. This is the story of a rescue mission that became a moment of humanity in the middle of a war zone. The Persian Gulf, a body of water roughly the size of Michigan, but carrying the weight of global stability on its surface. Every single day, nearly 21 million barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz. That's about 21% of the world's petroleum. It's one of the most strategically vital choke points on the planet, and it's crowded. Commercial tankers, fishing vessels, naval warships from a dozen nations. The US Navy's Fifth Fleet patrols these waters constantly, maintaining what they call freedom of navigation. On the other side, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy watches and waits. Tensions here aren't just high, they're generational. Since 1979, the United States and Iran have been locked in a cold conflict punctuated by moments of fire. Tanker wars in the 1980s, seized ships, proxy conflicts, drone strikes, sanctions, sabotage. But there's one thing that transcends even this hostility: the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, known as SOLAS. Adopted in 1914 after the Titanic disaster, SOLAS established a sacred principle. Any ship in distress must be helped, regardless of nationality, politics, or conflict. It's not just international law, it's an unwritten code among sailors, a code older than nations themselves. On January 14th, 2025, that code would be put to the ultimate test. The MV Golestan, a 40-year-old Iranian-flagged cargo vessel, was making a routine run from Bandar Abbas to Bushehr along the Iranian coast. Built in the 1980s, she wasn't much to look at. Rust-streaked hull, outdated safety equipment, the kind of ship that should have been scrapped a decade ago. But she was still working, still carrying cargo, still crewed by 23 Iranian sailors just trying to make a living. At 3:22 a.m. local time, everything changed. A rogue wave, estimated at over 20 feet, slammed into the Golestan's starboard side. The impact cracked open a hull plate already weakened by years of corrosion. Seawater began flooding the engine room. Within minutes, the ship lost power. Emergency pumps failed. The Golestan began listing heavily to starboard, 12 degrees, then 18, then 25. At 3:47 a.m., the ship's captain made the call no sailor ever wants to make. He activated the emergency position indicating radio beacon, the EPIRB, and broadcast a mayday on Channel 16. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is motor vessel Golestan, Iranian flag. We are taking on water. We are sinking. 23 persons on board. Position, 27 degrees, 18 minutes north, 52 degrees, 41 minutes east. Request immediate assistance. The message was picked up simultaneously by 3 assets. The Iranian Coast Guard station at Bandar Abbas, over 80 nautical miles away. The US Coast Guard cutter Wrangel, on routine patrol, 22 nautical miles to the southwest. And the USS Paul Hamilton, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, 31 nautical miles to the west. In the Combat Information Center of the Paul Hamilton, the watch officer stared at the radar contact. He knew exactly what this meant. An American warship was about to attempt a rescue of Iranian nationals in Iranian territorial waters in one of the most politically explosive regions on Earth. He picked up the secure phone to wake the captain. Commander Sarah Mitchell had been in the Navy for 19 years. She'd served in the Gulf 3 times. She knew the rules of engagement. She knew the political minefield. And she knew that none of it mattered right now. Under SOLAS, she had a legal obligation to render assistance. But this wasn't just any rescue. The Golestan was sinking inside Iran's 12 nautical mile territorial boundary. Technically, entering those waters without permission could be considered an act of aggression. In 1988, the USS Vincennes shot down an Iranian airliner in these same waters, killing 290 people. The wound was still raw. In 2016, Iran captured 10 U.S. sailors whose boats had drifted into Iranian waters. They were released, but the propaganda videos were broadcast worldwide. Commander Mitchell didn't have time for a diplomatic cable to Washington. She didn't have time to wait for clearance from CENTCOM. The Golestan was sinking now. She made the call in under 90 seconds. All stations, this is the captain. Set condition 3. Launch the rescue swimmer team. Alert sick bay for multiple casualties. Helm, come to course 085, flank speed. We are rendering assistance to a vessel in distress. At the same moment, 22 miles away, the USCG Wrangel, a 154-foot fast response cutter, was already moving at maximum speed toward the sinking ship. Commander Mitchell sent a flash message to 5th Fleet Headquarters, the Pentagon, and the Iranian Coast Guard. U.S. naval assets responding to Mayday from MV Golestan. Request coordination with Iranian authorities. Intend to render all possible assistance under international maritime law. There was no response from Iran. The Paul Hamilton and the Wrangel raced through the darkness toward a ship full of men who, on paper, were enemies. But the sea doesn't recognize enemies, only survivors. By 4:15 a.m., the Golestan was listing at 35 degrees. The crew had abandoned the lower decks. 8 men were trapped in the superstructure. 15 had made it to the weather deck, clinging to railings as the ship rolled sickeningly in the swells. The USCG Wrangel arrived first. Coast Guard fast response cutters are designed for exactly this kind of mission. Agile, fast, and equipped with advanced rescue systems. But even the best equipment is useless without the right people. And the Wrangel had some of the best. Petty Officer First Class James Rodriguez was the senior rescue swimmer. At 34, he'd pulled 47 people from the water in his career. He'd trained in seas far worse than this, but he'd never done it under these circumstances. As the Wrangel maneuvered alongside the Golestan, Rodriguez and his team prepared to deploy. The cutter's small boat, a rigid hull inflatable, was lowered into the water. The mission was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Get alongside the sinking ship, evacuate the crew, and do it before the Golestan capsized or sank beneath them. At 4:28 a.m., the small boat launched. The seas were running 8 to 10 feet. The Golestan was wallowing like a dying whale, her deck awash. The Iranian crew was screaming, some in Farsi, some in broken English, pointing to the men trapped inside. Rodriguez's team reached the ship's starboard side. The first survivor, a young deckhand, maybe 20 years old, jumped into the water. Rodriguez grabbed him, pulled him to the boat, then another, then another. But time was running out. The Golestan was settling by the stern. The bow was rising out of the water at an unnatural angle. At 4:41 a.m., the USS Paul Hamilton arrived. Commander Mitchell launched the ship's MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, a multi-mission bird equipped with a rescue hoist. If anyone was trapped on the highest parts of the sinking ship, this was the only way to get them out. The Seahawk's crew chief, Aviation Warfare Systems Operator Second Class Marcus Webb, prepared the hoist. Below him, the Golestan was dying. He could see figures moving on the bridge wing, 8 men cut off from the rest of the crew by rising water. "Swimmer ready?" the pilot asked over the intercom. "Swimmer ready," Webb replied. The helicopter descended into the chaos. At 4:52 a.m., with the Golestan listing past 40 degrees, the rescue became a race against physics. From the Coast Guard's small boat, Petty Officer Rodriguez had pulled 11 survivors from the water. They were exhausted, hypothermic, traumatized, but alive. The Wrangel crew wrapped them in thermal blankets, started IVs, assessed injuries. But 8 men were still trapped. The Seahawk helicopter hovered 60 feet above the sinking ship. The rotor wash kicked up spray, reducing visibility to near zero. The Golestan was rolling unpredictably, her masts swinging like clubs. Aviation Warfare Systems Operator Webb lowered the rescue basket. On the bridge wing, the Iranian sailors understood. One by one, they climbed into the basket. The hoist brought them up, slowly, carefully, as the ship groaned beneath them. First man up, the ship's engineer, Mohammed Rezai, 52 years old. When he reached the helicopter, he locked eyes with Webb. No common language. But Webb saw something universal in that gaze. Gratitude. Relief. The recognition that the man who just saved his life wore the uniform of a country his government called the Great Satan. Webb just nodded and helped him inside. Second man up. Third. Fourth. At 5:03 a.m., the Golestan shuddered. The sound of tearing metal echoed across the water. The ship's back was breaking. 3 men were still on the bridge wing. "We've got maybe 2 minutes," the helicopter pilot said. "Maybe less." Webb worked faster. Fifth man up. Sixth. The ship lurched. One of the remaining men lost his footing, slid toward the edge. The ship's captain, Mohammed Khani, 58 years old, a lifetime at sea, grabbed him, held him. "Last 2, Webb shouted. "Get them now." The basket dropped. The younger sailor climbed in. Webb hauled him up as the Golestan tilted past 50 degrees. 1 man left, the captain. But Captain Khani wasn't getting in the basket. He was waving them off, pointing to the water below. "What the hell is he doing?" the pilot asked. Then they saw it. A man in the water clinging to debris. A sailor who'd been swept overboard in the chaos. They'd lost count of him. Webb didn't hesitate. "Get me down there." Petty Officer Rodriguez's boat was already moving. He'd seen it too. The Seahawk reposition. Webb went down on the hoist, not in the basket, but on the hook, wetsuit and all. He hit the water, swam to the sailor, got the harness around him. "2 up," he called. The hoist lifted both men. As they rose, Webb looked down at the Golestan. Captain Khani was still on the bridge wing, alone now, waiting. The basket went down one last time. At 5:11 a.m., exactly 84 minutes after the Mayday call, Captain Mohammed Khani became the last man off the MV Golestan. 90 seconds later, the ship capsized. At 5:14 a.m., she sank stern first into 180 feet of water. 23 Iranian sailors had gone into the sea. 23 were pulled out alive. Not one was lost. By 6 a.m., all 23 survivors were aboard the USCGC Wrangel in USS Paul Hamilton. Navy corpsmen treated them for hypothermia, exhaustion, and minor injuries. Hot coffee, dry clothes, medical attention. The Iranian sailors were stunned. Some wept. Some prayed. Some sat in silence, processing what had just happened. Captain Khani asked to speak with Commander Mitchell. Through a translator, one of the Paul Hamilton sailors who spoke Farsi, he said something simple. "You saved our lives." "Thank you," Mitchell replied. "That's what sailors do." At 7:30 a.m., an Iranian Coast Guard vessel arrived. After brief coordination between the U.S. and Iranian commands, conducted with remarkable professionalism given the circumstances, the survivors were transferred to Iranian custody. As the last man crossed over, several of the Iranian sailors turned back. They saluted the American crews. The Americans saluted back. No cameras captured it. No politicians were there to spin it. Just sailors acknowledging sailors. The rescue made international headlines within hours. In Washington, the Pentagon praised the crews for their professionalism and adherence to international maritime law. In Tehran, the Iranian government issued a statement thanking all parties involved in the rescue, while carefully avoiding explicit mention of the US Navy and Coast Guard. But Iranian social media told a different story. Videos and photos of the survivors, shared by their families, went viral. Comments flooded in. "They saved our sons when they didn't have to. This is humanity. Thank you to the American sailors." For a brief moment, the narrative shifted. Not enemies, not rivals, just human beings, helping human beings. Of course, the geopolitical reality didn't change. The sanctions remained. The warships kept patrolling. The tensions stayed high. But something else remained too. Petty Officer Rodriguez was asked by a reporter if he ever thought about the politics of the rescue. "No," he said. "I thought about 23 people who needed help. That's the job." Commander Mitchell put it differently. "The sea is the great equalizer. It doesn't care about your nationality. And when someone's drowning, neither do we." The rescue crew returned to routine patrol within 48 hours. No medals were awarded, and this was just part of the mission. But in a small coastal town in Iran, Mohammad Rezai, the 52-year-old engineer pulled from the helicopter, told his grandchildren about the night he nearly died, and about the American sailor who pulled him into the sky. There's an old saying among mariners: the sea is a democracy. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire on a super yacht or a deckhand on a rust bucket. When the ocean decides it's your time, you're equal. And there's another code, older than nations, older than flags. Sailors save sailors. On January 14th, 2025, and in one of the most politically hostile bodies of water on Earth, that code held. 23 men went home to their families because a group of Americans decided that human life mattered more than politics. That's not propaganda. That's not a diplomatic gesture. That's just who they are. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard conduct search and rescue operations all over the world. In 2024 alone, the Coast Guard saved over 3,000 lives. The Navy's humanitarian missions span from disaster relief to medical evacuations. They don't ask for permission. They don't check passports. They just go. Because somewhere out in the darkness, someone is sending a mayday, and someone is answering. The MV Golestan rests on the floor of the Persian Gulf. Her crew is alive. And on a crisp morning in January, for just a moment, the world saw what happens when humanity overrides politics. The code held, it always does.